Human beings work real hard to avoid change. What do we see happening in the current administration? Hey, this is a human thing. It's a human phenomenon. They're not being weird. They're being human. Like if folks like Linal, you're not upset enough. It's like, no, I actually get it. They're scared. The reason leaders are not inclusive is because they're human beings. Uh-oh. Human beings do not like change. You should see the heads nod when I'm training this in corporate America. Because for the first time, leaders in the room are looking at me and they're like, you see me. You see me. This is not normal. Inclusion is not normal, folks. That is not how we were designed. In fact, if you read the Bible, we were designed to go into our own little groups ever since the Tower of Babel. This is why it will be a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. And the only leaders that are inclusive are leaders who have strong leadership commitments, guiding principles, and core values. Because this is not something you're going to skip yourself into as a leader. You're just not. It takes commitment and it takes hard work to be inclusive. If you're trying to figure out why you got treated the way you got treated in the workplace, it's because there was a leader who didn't have clear commitment.
You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live a dream. Your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals.
Part 2 of this 8-part series where we talk about something that I don't think we talk about a whole lot in our community when it comes to leadership. In fact, I think one of the biggest mistakes about the topic I'm covering today is that it's not discussed in monolithic communities, right, where we all look alike. I think sometimes the assumption is, well, you know, we're leading the way we should lead, or we're operating the way we should operate, which is far from the case, because part of what I'm going to talk about today is one of the most difficult competencies of leadership that I believe there is. In fact, one of the reasons why I decided to make this part 2 is because last week we talked about leadership commitment, and leadership commitment being your anchor, the anchor that supports you in making the tough leadership decisions that otherwise you wouldn't make. And then leading in alignment with guiding principles that you generate. Last week, I shared my leadership commitment, which is my purpose. I shared my leadership guiding principles, all 7 of them. I shared the 6 guiding principles of a 96-year-old billionaire who built a multi-billion-dollar company that I had the chance to learn from. If you missed that one, you want to go back and check it out. Definitely want to go back and check it out because, one, it will set you up for full clarity for this 8-part series, and 2, I believe it was first because it is the anchor of leadership, that particular what I taught last week. This week, I want to round out what I talked about last week before I move into inclusion. And so one of the things that we didn't talk about that align very closely to guiding principles are core values, and the importance for every leader to have core values. Here's the way I think about values. Your core values are like your personal fingerprints, right? It's what you leave on the people that you lead after you've led them. Either they're a bit skittish, afraid, maybe don't trust leadership anymore, right? Like you did that. You know how if there's a crime scene, they're looking for forensics. Is like, which leader did this? Let's look at the fingerprints, right? It's that leader's values or lack thereof that caused this individual to be this way now. I've had people who've come under my leadership where I've said, hey, I really want to know. Like, you know, tell me. You can look in their eyes and you can be like, man, somebody did something to them. Like some leader somewhere did not did not hold their word. They don't trust, even though I'm saying it. They're just, man, there's going to be some work that has to be done to rebuild trust for this individual to really believe that when I ask for feedback, I really want it, right? Because some other leader's fingerprints are on that crime scene in that person's life. And so when I think about values in terms of fingerprints. And like fingerprints, when it comes to leaders, no leader's core values have to be the same, right? They can be very different, mixed up. It doesn't matter. But the core values that we carry, we leave on everyone that we come across and everything that we do. Like, that's how important our core values are. So one might ask, well, Linal, how do I identify my core values? Well, one of the things that we talked about last week was for any leader that's really, really seriously going through this particular series, one of the things that we talked about last week was the opportunity to actually think about your retirement, who would be there, all those things. But now I want to kind of add one piece to it. And if you're really serious about your leadership, because, I'm also aware that that's a minority. There are going to be people who, quote unquote, want to be like, I'm serious about my leadership. But in terms of the people who actually say, I need to sit down and do this, it's never as large as the folks that have the aspiration. And so for the few of you who are really serious about this, part of how you can identify your core values is you can write your retirement speech right now. And the things that you want to leave with people, the impact you want to leave on those that you lead, all you have to do is go back and look at those adjectives and those sentences and then identify the core value that matches that. That's a very clear way for you to begin identifying the core values that matter to you specifically. Because when I'm maybe walking away from leadership, and for me, I can't really imagine walking away from leadership. I believe I'll be leading in some capacity, God willing, until my last breath, whether it's mentoring a leader and just saying, hey, man, think about it this way versus that way, right? But I don't see just like never leading again or retiring in that capacity. I don't know that purpose actually retires, right? It's you keep going. You just keep going until you can't. And so when I think about it that way, then I will still be leaving that fingerprint, those core values that matter to me on the people that I have the opportunity to lead. And that's one of the ways you can find that out. The other part that I really want you to think about, and this is for my entrepreneurs, my solopreneurs, anybody that calls themselves a small business owner, one of the things that you want to have in place are organizational values. Organizational values. Whenever I work with an organization, and by the way, I've worked with organizations who are doing, maybe $500,000, organizations that are doing, 3 to 5 million, organizations that are doing 10 to 100 million, who don't have values. Who don't have values. Now, why is it important for an organization to have values? And I'm not just talking about values that they post up. When you walk in, you see, I remember I walked into this dealership years ago. And one of the first words I saw was integrity on the wall. And then as I was going through the car buying process, I was like, I had to point to the word with the sales guy. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, hey, man, this is what y'all say y'all believe in, and you trying to do this? And he was, oh, let me go talk to my manager, right? So I was like, what's happening here, right? They didn't really. So I'm not talking about organization values just hang on the wall. I'm talking about organizational values that the leaders actually use to hold each other accountable to hold the employees accountable. And here's the kicker. They actually allow the employees to use the values to hold them accountable to. Those are the kind of values I'm talking about. And when you have values like that in your organization, they become a shortcut to trust and powerful culture, period. And remember, that's a 3-part process, though. It's not just having the values. I'm going to say it again. They're organizational values that leaders hold themselves accountable to. And when I say they hold themselves, like every leader, like if Ade and I are both leaders on this team, right? We're leading it, and there are clear values. And Ade sees, like, hey, man, that value that we have of respect, I don't know that you upheld that value in the last meeting with the people that work for us. Like, he's able to say that. And because I'm anchored in those values, I'm committed to those values, I'm like, really? You don't think so? Like, no, man, yes, it's like, really? Well, give me an example of what you mean. And when he gives me that example, then I hold myself accountable to go back and ask for forgiveness. Hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to be disrespectful to you guys. Ade, he shared with me his perspective of it. That's not what I meant. And when you do that with your employees, it builds trust, right? So leader to leader accountability is one. Leader to employee accountability is 2, right? That's the easy one for leaders. No, it's not. Now, leader to employee accountability ain't even easy for a lot of leaders. Now that I think about it, like they just I don't want to have a difficult conversation. So that's a whole nother conversation we're going to have. I think in 2 weeks, we'll have that conversation around, which is one of the 6 characteristics of effective leadership: accountability, the ability to actually hold people accountable. A lot of folks think they do it. We'll get there. So anyway, that's number 2. And then number 3, the ability for the employee to come back and hold the leader accountable. Because of their clear core values, they're like, hey, look, based on the values, I'm not sure that the interaction we had aligns with that. As a leader, if I'm committed to that, I'm listening, I'm quiet. That person already has my feedback formula, and we can keep the trust and culture in place as a result of that. Okay, values. As we get deeper into this conversation, I believe it's easy for some people listening to be like, well, Linal's talking about leadership. That doesn't include me. I'm going to wait till this series is over and I'll check back in. That's a big time mistake, because all of us function as leaders in some capacity. All of us function as leaders in our lives in some capacity. And if you intend to grow, let me put it like this. Most folks have an intent to be a millionaire. You do realize that if you become a millionaire, you're thrust into leadership almost immediately. If you become a multimillionaire, you're thrust into leadership almost immediately. I don't know if it's true. I was looking at an article last night that was saying that George Floyd's family that received a $50 million payout, they're broke already. Now, why is that? Again, if we're not ready for it, they were thrust into a role of leadership. Like, you get that kind of money, now you got to lead financial advisors, you got to lead attorneys, y'all follow what I'm saying? And if you don't have a philosophy for leadership, you're in trouble. But not just with them, but for your family. If within your family, you don't have a clear philosophy for leadership, core values. Let me give you an example. One of the things that I say to my son often is that what Harrises do? Now, the reason I can ask that question is because in our household, there have been core values that have been set up within the home that we all live by. Our children can hold us accountable to those values. Like, Dad, I thought that we weren't supposed to move like that, right? And it creates a conversation. You know what? You're right, man. et cetera, right? Like, it creates a conversation. And for anyone listening, if you have a family, then this is a conversation for you. I don't care if you're the cousin, the uncle, whatever. This is a conversation for you. And something for you to think about is, what's one value your family, your team, or even the group you live in? Like, I had, when I was in college, I had a core friendship. And we knew that friendship is valuable. We also knew that friendship is fragile. And so what we did to keep our friendship intact is we created core values, right? I am still friends with 3 of the 4 men who created those values to this day. And the 4th, the reason he's not in the friendship circle is because he stepped outside of the values. Does that make sense? Like, he stepped outside those values of trust. All those, so it's like, oh, you knew those were the core values. You made decisions multiple times to step outside those values. So then as a result, I can't rock with you like that, if that makes sense, right? And the 3 of us are so clear on that. It's kind of like unfortunate, but I guess we're going to move with just the 3 of us. And to this day, we're all still friends. So what's one value your family, team, or group lives by? Even if it's unspoken, I just want you to kind of, and for those of you on Facebook, put it in a stream. For those of you on YouTube, put it in a stream. Like, what's one value that your family, the group that you're a part of, that you all live by? If they're going to be your friend, then this is a core value, right? This is something. And by the way, if it hasn't been spoken within your groups, within your family, this is a great time to actually bring it up and say, hey, like, these are the values. Even for me, as I'm teaching this, I'm like, man, does everybody know the values of inspirational perspective? Like, I don't know if we had that conversation recently, Ade. Like, what are the values of inspirational perspective as an organization? What are the values of Insights for Life? By the way, they're different values because they have different functions, right? So what are the values of Insights for Life as an organization? One of the things that we do is whenever we're about to work with an organization, one of the things that we actually align their values with our values to see if it's a fit. Like, can we actually work together? Will this work? And we show it to them. And there have been times where I've turned down work because I'm like, it's not a fit. It's not a fit. Like, you all's mission doesn't align with my purpose. What you want to do doesn't align with what we want, the impact we want to have on people. So let's talk about this thing called diversity first. Let's talk about this thing called diversity that is actually under attack right now. If a person were to ask me, Linal, do you believe in the business value of diversity? My answer, without flinching, would be 100% yes. In fact, if you look at the teams that I've built, you can look through every company. I have diverse teams. I don't have monolithic teams. Okay. Now, my belief is if you believe in diversity, then your team, like, everybody on your team don't look like you. That's it. Now, I've been asked as an African-American CEO or a black leader, why my entire team isn't black. I've been asked that before by black folk, by so-called black folk. Hey, man, why you didn't give somebody else that opportunity? But if I'm going to say out my mouth, I want y'all to listen to me, because we'll get mad when somebody else does it to us in Fortune 500 world, right? We'll be like, no, they didn't. Look at that. There's no diversity. but then we'll go build a business where there's no diversity too. You can't have it both ways. Like either you believe in it or you don't. Now I know this is going to trigger some folks, right? This might trigger some folks. And I'm not saying sometimes maybe you don't have access to diverse talent pools. One of the things I always tell CEOs in Fortune 500 companies is that then you have to go gain access to diverse talent pools, right? We see a pullback from all that right now. Let me be very clear about something because we're going to talk about inclusion. And I want to get deep into inclusion, but I feel like I'm leaping over something if I don't talk about diversity. Inclusion is a competence. It's a leadership competence. Diversity is something different. It's not a leadership competence, right? It's a strategy. Y'all follow? It's a strategy. And if you have a leader right now that is like struggling with everything that's going on, they're like, well, I agree with the Trump administration, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can be your trumpet. Like, you take this, you let them hear it, because I'm about to break it down for you. Okay? I'm going to break it down for you in the best way that I possibly can. All right. So there's no question that there's been an attack on diversity in the workplace in the United States of America. And the real question I would have is that attack backed by data? Now, let me be clear about something. I spent 12 years of my professional career in corporate America running global operations for different organizations. And one of the things that I had to do to be a responsible and excellent operator is pay attention to data. In operations, you don't do what the people feel like because everything is based on the numbers. If you do what even the CEO feels like, it may not properly impact the numbers. So it was my job, even if, and I can tell you, I remember sitting in one of my CEO's offices explaining, hey, this is the direction we need to go if we are going to be viable in this business. And he was so upset by the numbers that he cursed me out. Like he was spitting and everything. I can't. And I just sat there. I waited for him to finish. By the way, for the millennials and Gen Zers, because Ide's looking at me like, you got cursed out in corporate America? And any baby boomer or Xer that's my age knows that back in the day, you can go into an office and get cursed out. You could be like, I don't feel psychologically safe. You couldn't run to HR back then. They'd be like, psychologically what? Man, grow up. Sit down. It wasn't none of that. My psychological safety is none of that. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying we had to have thicker skin back then. All right. So this man cursed me out. I waited for him to finish. And I told him, I said, sir, with all due respect, your emotions don't change the numbers. Now, here's the thing. If his emotions did change the numbers, I'd have lost my job that day. But he was a CEO. He got out of his feelings and he was like, let me see these numbers again. And he looked at him. He's like, do what you got to do. He wasn't happy, but the numbers said we need to go this direction. It's that simple. You can be mad. You can be glad. Doesn't matter. The numbers say we need to go this direction. I want you to listen to me clearly. When it comes to diversity, there are numbers and data that back diversity. You can get scared of the Trump administration. You can change your entire company, right? I've had this conversation with executives like, man, you sure you want to do that? You can do that, but the numbers back diversity. A few years ago, and this is back 2013. So when I say a few years ago, like a decade, more than a decade ago, when I moved from operations and my CEO asked me to take on the chief diversity officer role at the company I was working at, the first thing I did, because I came from operations, was I was like, okay, I don't know, how else to explain diversity other than to get numbers. That's what I did for a living before that, is to find data and numbers that back this conversation up. I don't want to go into the offices of peers that don't look like me and have a conversation that sounds good. I want to have a conversation that actually, the math is behind me. Y'all, is this making sense? And by the way, if you're a diversity leader right now and you're struggling in your organization, consider that you might not be having hardcore data conversations. You're having like emotional conversations. This ain't about emotions. This is about data. Data. Okay? Numbers. So I went and pulled the numbers. When I pulled the numbers, it changed the conversations I was having with my peers. Because now this ain't the thing that, feels good. It ain't about doing the right thing. The question is, do you want to grow the business? Do you want to make more money? Do you want this organization to be more profitable? Do you want this organization to be able to generate more revenue? If so, then we need to work on hiring diverse teams. Period. That's what the data says. Now, let me back this up. Matter of fact, if you don't believe me, if you're like, maybe, I know there's a lot of people that listen to me. They're like, okay, so Linal's doing his thing now, and he's tapping in. If you don't believe me, then I want you to check this out. I did some research, and what I did is I went to Perplexity, and I asked Perplexity this question. I was like, there's been a clear attack on diversity in the workplace in America. But is this attack backed by numbers and data? Right? We want to be the best country in the world. We want to have the S&P 500. We want that to remain viable. I don't know about you guys, but I invest in the S&P 500. I want that to remain. I want that to continue to grow the way that it has in the past. That's a good thing for me. That's a good thing for my family, right? But is this attack backed by numbers and data? A few years ago, I uncovered data that diversity actually benefited most companies that embraced it. Is that still true? So I went on perplexity.ai, and this is what I did, okay? If you don't know Perplexity, you should check it out. It's probably the most robust research engine that is backed by AI. So this is what it said back. Despite a heightened attack on diversity initiatives in American companies, fueled by legal and political pressure, right? So notice the difference. This is somehow we've had attorneys come in, on the right, and they're like, oh, that's not fair, right? And I want to be very clear about something, too. I'm talking because diversity it has layers. Right now, I'm just talking about ethnicity and race. Because I think the deeper we got into those layers is where we start to kind of go off, okay? Right now, I'm talking just ethnicity and race, all right? That's it. Now, religion, not anything else. Okay, so fueled by legal and political pressures. So despite a heightened attack on diversity initiatives in American companies, fueled by legal and political pressure, recent data continues to show that diversity in the workplace is both beneficial for business performance and highly valued by employees. Those are the people that make your company go, by the way, and investors. If you're an investor, you want a hack, you want an investing hack that I've been using, just go and find the companies that have reversed the diversity policies. I wouldn't invest in them. They're not going to do well. In fact, we're already seeing that they're not doing well, i.e. Target. I can go down the list, right? They are struggling because they have to remember that as much as you want to talk about it, that you do want your company to reflect your customer base. Period. In fact, I believe that that's the only time that monolithic companies can do well. A monolithic company with a monolithic customer base. So if you are a black CEO that owns a company on the south side of Chicago and all of your customers are black and you have an all black organization, you can do well because you reflect your customer base. And I'm not mad at an all white company that's doing the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm not mad at that. But when you have a global organization or a national organization and the top doesn't reflect the customer base, they're not going to do well. That's an investment hack for anybody that's been trying to figure out how to get an edge. That's one piece. Okay. So what we do know is diversity still drives business performance. Multiple studies conducted in recent years, and by the way, I'm reading off Perplexity now. Multiple studies conducted in recent years and cited by investment briefs, right? Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, shows that companies with diverse teams and leadership continue to significantly outperform those that lack diversity. For example, companies with top quartile ethnic and gender diversity on executive teams. I'm also including gender diversity, you guys, male, female. Gender diversity on executive teams are 36 to 39% more likely to financially outperform peers. So I have a 40% chance, almost, to outperform my peers if I have a diverse team. Again, I'm just talking data, right? Leadership diversity correlates positively with return on equity, revenue growth, and share price. So if I have diverse leadership, then that means that there's a positive impact on equity, revenue growth, and share price. Once again, this is out of, if you go to, you can actually get that information at coregov.law.harvard. That's the resource there. Because somebody's going to be like, what? Diverse teams generate improvements in risk management by 30+%, innovation, market penetration, and talent retention. All right. My source there is cpajournal.com. All right. And then lack of diversity is associated with increased financial, legal, and reputational risk. You can go to catalyst.com to find that. All right. Then you have employee and public sentiment. 56% of employees view a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as positive. 68% among young workers. We're going to talk about that in a minute because almost 70% of young workers prefer working within companies that value diversity. 76% of job seekers are more likely to consider they want a diverse workforce. They want people, they want to come in and it's like, okay, man, I get to meet different people. Around 80% of employees want to work for companies that have strong D&I efforts, and 65% of U.S. companies have maintained or increased their budgets in 2025 despite the political headwinds. That means there's another 35% that haven't. Okay? I'm giving you the investment hack. I would find those 65, watch them. That's where I'm placing my bets. Okay. Now, this is marked. I'm still reading. This is corporate trends and pushback. This is a marked wave of high-profile. There is a marked wave, of high-profile companies publicly reducing their D&I commitments in 2025, often citing compliance with the new administration's orders. However, many industry leaders, Costco, Apple, J.P. Morgan Chase, Delta, have remained steadfast, warning that rollbacks raise investor risk. I don't know if you're in any of those companies, Costco, Apple, Chase. But they're saying, oh, no, that's going to create investment risk. And it undermines competitiveness in their markets. So diversity is increasingly seen as a necessary strategy for long-term shareholder value and competitiveness. So, if I'm a good CEO or C-suite leader, that means that I make decisions backed by data, not emotional sentiment, nor by political atmospheres. I have one job, and that job is to please my customers and my shareholders. And we can see that based on the data that diversity is something that supports those things. period. Now, I felt like I needed to put that in there just in case some of y'all can't articulate why they, because why are they doing this? It's emotionalism. When I walk into a room, I know that there are going to be people in there who believe that I'm talking about this because of the color of my skin, right? So the first thing I do is I let them know first, why are we here? And then right after I get into why are we here, I get into the numbers. Now, the why are we here, I co-create with that organization, why you've been told to come sit for the next 90 minutes with me, etc. I'm not going to go into that right now. But what I am going to get into with you all are the numbers. Because again, like if you're driving your business off emotion, you're in trouble. Give me the numbers. Anybody that works for me knows, like, where's the data? Where's it? We're going to make a decision. Where's the data? Okay. What are the numbers? What's the business case? When I ran operations for all those years, even when I walked into the CEO's office and he was, upset, it didn't change the business case. You can get in your emotions. It doesn't change the business case. So what's the business case then? What are the numbers for inclusion? Now, I think this is really important for us to understand. Like, what's the current environment? What's the current work environment? Well, number one, we are now, if you work in the Fortune 1000 or even in some mid-cap companies, you are now working with the most ethnically diverse and mixed race identity group that you ever have. Like, ever. Right? You are working with the highest percentage of people in all time that have ever identified as LGBTQIA+. In the workforce today, you have 30% or more of millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha who identify as LGBTQIA+, right? 30% or more, right? So we have to be able to have grown conversations, move accordingly. 30% of Gen Z are the children of immigrants. 30%. So in the workforce, more than likely, 30%. Even when I think about my team, I think we have a few people, and I'm not thinking about just one company. I'm thinking about multiple companies who are the children of immigrants, right? It makes sense, 30%. If I got 3 folks, one of them is likely the child of an immigrant. The young people, and I shouldn't say it that way, but in terms of the demographics, millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, they are more likely to report mental health concerns than any other demographic group before them, right? It's not something that we as Gen X even had the luxury for. Like, back when I was growing my career, I couldn't imagine, and this is no shade to the young folks, but I couldn't imagine calling in saying, I need a mental health day. Like, you damn near couldn't call in sick if you were sick. You know what I'm saying? Let alone, my mental health. Like, they'd be like, what? Well, you could stay home. You could stay home for the rest of the year, right? Get your mental health right, and I'll never see you again. That's how it used to be. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's how it's not like that anymore. So as leaders, we have to wrap our mind around that. Here's the other part. Millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha have been shaped by political divisiveness and racially charged cultures and traumatic events that include mass shootings and global pandemics, more so than we have, right? I experienced the pandemic, 5 years ago when I was in my mid-40s. That didn't really change how I operate in the world. But imagine if you're Gen Y or Gen Z, and you were in college during that time. Like, that shapes how you think about the world. Which is why some of us, if they work for us, you're like, I don't get them. And to leaders, what I'm saying is it's your responsibility to get them. This is why we're having this conversation. It's part of why we're having this conversation. It's your responsibility to get them. It's your responsibility to understand them, to build a relationship with them so you understand how they operate and why they operate the way they operate. Jack Welch said this years ago. I was in New York. I had the opportunity to hear him speak. And he said every manager over the age of 35 should be considered dangerous. Every manager over the age of 35 should be considered dangerous. And then he said, why? Because the rhythm of business has changed over the past 40 years, the rhythm of business hasn't changed over the past 40 years, but everything else has. So here I am, and I really want you to think about yourself as a leader. Here I am, and I'm unwilling to change how I lead. We're going to do it the old way, right? And I'm trying to figure out why people won't work for me, why I got a revolving door. When everything has changed, like the world has changed, I need to change my leadership. I need to step up. Now, am I saying this because I'm emotional about it? Or am I saying this because it's backed by data? Right? Am I saying this because I want to be right? Or am I saying this because I want to pay attention to the data? Let me ask you all a question. And for those of you who are watching, I want you to put the answer in Facebook or YouTube. In the United States of America, where do non-Hispanic whites under the age of 23 fall? Under the age of 23. A, do they represent the majority of that demographic? And again, these are non-Hispanic whites, right? So basically white folks, all right? In the U.S., where do whites under the age of 23 fall? A, do they represent the majority of that demographic? Or B, do they represent the minority? So here's the answer. Here's the answer. The answer is that they represent the minority of that demographic. I gave the answer earlier when I said the majority of them are baby boomers, right? Right now, when you look at whites under the age of 23, they are a minority in the United States of America. If you're trying to understand why there's certain policies and pushes on the right, like they're trying to protect something. Something's shifted, and this is why there's such a, and by the way, if you're like, well, it doesn't make sense because the data says we need migrant workers. The data says we need, like in order for the economy to continue, the data says we need these individuals. Why is ICE running around locking them up? Y'all starting to understand? It's all rooted in a fear emotion for them. Because for the first time, come 2030, I think it's actually 2045, they'll no longer be a majority. And so they're trying to control something that's uncontrollable, basically. And I think we need to understand why. Like, why is this happening? Well, this is why it's happening. 75% of today's workforce are millennials. For those of us who are Gen Xers, baby boomers, you probably already get this. You kind of like, man, this looks way different from when I was in. It's like 75% of the workforce is made up of millennials. For the first time in U.S. history, minorities make up the most new hires between the age of 25 and 54. And women in particular are driving that trend, right? This is data backed, right? This is, where did we get this one? It was published back in 2019, and I can't see exactly what the source was. Oh, Pew Research Center. I'm sharing my sources too. Okay. The source for the minority population being the majority by 2045 is brookings.edu. You can go check that out. Okay. So the United States is quickly becoming more diverse. All right. So what does this mean? If the U.S. is quickly becoming more diverse, then the workplace will be more diverse too. It's that simple. And so businesses that don't value diversity and inclusion and or do not have a clear diversity and inclusion strategy are dooming themselves to failure. Period. Right? This is what the data is telling us. All right. So then why does this matter to us? Why does this matter to us? Well, in 2025, millennials make up the majority of the workforce, right? But majority of the bosses are Gen X. That's a matter of inclusion, right? They think different from me. I'm an Xer. So I need to figure out how to be inclusive if I'm gonna be successful. All right. 44% of millennials classify themselves as minorities, right? So if I'm a white leader, I better get with it. I better start becoming more culturally competent and inclusive, because most of the folks that work for me are not going to look like me, just based off the population itself. The U.S. is quickly becoming more diverse. The workplace will be more diverse. And simply, we understand that if a business doesn't value this, it cannot be successful. Now, I'm not saying that because it sounds good. I'm saying it because there's also data, 2024 data from Manpower Group Research and SHRM, that says about 7 in 10 companies reported talent shortages in 2024. 7 out of 10. How many of you all are having a hard time hiring folks? Like I said, my wife and I, between the two of us, we run 6 companies. All right. We've been in interviews. I know this to be true. I know that there are not just good people growing on trees. Talented folks growing on trees. You get where I'm going? And so there is a talent shortage. It's at the worst level ever. Part of it is because, our education system is worse than it's ever been. So it's hard to get folks coming in who actually, if y'all follow, here's the other part. 61% of leaders identified attracting and retaining talent as a top risk. As a top risk. 61% of leaders, right? In the corporate space. The global talent shortage has tripled in the past decade. It's tripled. We have these conversations, folks ask me, you think AI is going to replace all these jobs? And I'm like, man, these companies, I just saw another company that laid off about 4,000 people. I'm like, y'all moving too fast. All that talent, maybe you should have thought about redeploying them in some other capacity. Like, they moving too fast. And it's already happening. One company I mentioned not too long ago did this. They're already hiring back the folks. They dropped 10,000. I think they brought back on 3,500 already. But think about the emotional and cultural impact. More than half of international businesses polled reported skill shortages as well. So it's not just an American thing. And over 3 in 4 organizations in the U.S. have experienced difficulty recruiting full-time positions. 3 in 4, that's 75%. Nearly 50% of these organizations have faced retention difficulties in the last 12 months. They can't keep people. The reason they can't keep people is because they have poorly trained leaders. People don't leave jobs. They leave leaders. What is this competence of inclusion? A leader is inclusive when they have the ability to create an environment where every employee feels they can fully contribute, and every customer is optimally served, regardless of differences. If you call us up and you want us to do work in your organization, it doesn't come down to what you look like as a customer. Like, every customer is optimally served regardless of differences. And in this organization, every employee can fully contribute. Fully contribute. Now, as a CEO, why is that important to me? The reason it's important to me is because if Ade is on my team, when I pay him, he doesn't get a fraction of that pay. He doesn't get a fraction. He gets 100% of what we agreed on, which means I need 100% out of his work product. And if I won't listen to this man, and he doesn't feel like he can fully show up, and he doesn't feel like he can fully contribute, then who's losing? Me or him? He getting 100% of his pay. But I'm not getting 100% of his contribution because of how I show up as a leader? That's goofy on me. That's goofy on me as a leader. Like, I need 100% of his contribution if I'm paying out 100% of his pay. That's just how I think about this, right? So organizations that push inclusion are saying, hey, we care about the investment we made in you so much that we want to make sure that you can give everything you have. When you put your hand up, I'm not, here we go, because you look different from me, because you talk differently. Like I need to hear what you have to say. What's your contribution? So that way, when I pay payroll, I know it's a good investment. It's that simple. I think one of the reasons this is disconnected in the corporate arena is because in the corporate arena, leaders are so disconnected from what's being paid to their employees. Right? But when I was in corporate America, the largest line item of my budget was my payroll. So I got to work that. If you're a leader and you're listening, you got to work that. That's the largest line item in your budget is the payroll. Are you getting 100%? Okay. Here's another reason why inclusion matters. I should have gave this slide to you. I didn't. So I want you all to imagine a chart, right? And on the x-axis, it's the number of teams, and on the y-axis, it's team performance. Kind of like this, okay? And team performance is poor when it's a diverse team that's managed poorly. And then if you have a homogeneous team, everybody looks the same, then the performance kind of teeters up a bit over a diverse team that's managed poorly. I think one of the reasons leaders feel more comfortable with homogeneous teams is because if I'm a bad leader, then I need a homogeneous team if we're going to perform halfway well. Because if I have a diverse team and I'm not a good leader, we're not going to perform well. But here's the kicker. Diverse teams managed well outperform homogeneous teams. So it comes down to leadership competence. This is why inclusion matters so much. This is why it matters. Now, if we go into this idea around it's not just in business, but it's also with families, friend groups. Like if you want, one of the reasons many friend groups, like folks just kind of, then, you know, they're not holding each other accountable, they're not growing as a friend group, is because there's somebody who's like, hey, I think we should do this that the friend group ain't listening to. What if we all learned how to trade and work together? And they're like, girl, get out of here. They're not listening to it. And if there was full inclusion in the friend group, they would stop and say, that'd make us better. Inclusive companies are 5 times more innovative. So here we go with the numbers, right? Like, if you're like, well, Linal, one of the reasons I don't hire folks that don't look like me is because I'm afraid of the implications if they feel like I'm being funny acting or I do something wrong. Because sometimes we do all this for safety, right? And I'm talking to us as black folk. Like, you might not want to hire somebody else because, well, then now you understand how they feel over there, right? But what if I challenged myself? What if I challenged myself and I said, I want my business to be more innovative? Inclusive teams are 5 times more innovative. I want my team to work hard. Inclusive teams are 3 times more likely to work hard to help the team succeed. Inclusive teams are 3 times more effective than non-inclusive teams. Inclusive teams are 3 times more effective, 3 times more likely to provide excellent customer service. Inclusive teams. You have customer service issues, you probably don't have inclusion. Members of inclusive teams are 5 times more likely to be very satisfied with their job. Think about this, right? If I see something at work and I'm like, man, we should handle that. And then I call up my boss and I say, we should handle that. My boss goes, man, that's a really good idea. Am I going to feel like I'm making a difference? Oh, okay. That was a good idea. Like, that's the conversation over the dinner with the wife. Hey, babe, yeah, so I had a conversation with the boss today. I was kind of pointing something out. He was, man, it's a good idea. I feel good about, like, that's a good feeling. But if I'm not inclusive, oh, here we go. He always got something to say. Then how is he feeling? How's work going, baby? Well, man, it's I don't even know why I'm there. So then what happens? Productivity drops, right? More likely for them to leave the organization. Like, this is why inclusion matters. Members of inclusive teams are 3 times less likely to leave their current employer. I just told you why. Members of inclusive teams are 2 times, more likely to receive frequent career development opportunities. So now they're developing. Let me ask you this. If I'm a CEO, I run a business, and the people on my team are developing, is that a good thing? Will that positively impact the company? Like, some of this is 2 + 2 = 4, but sometimes it got to be spelled out. Members of inclusive teams are 2 times more likely to have been given constructive performance feedback. Because if I'm willing to listen to you, right? If I'm your leader and I listen to you, you're more likely to listen to me. So then, if you have this type of data, I'm sure somebody's saying, well, Linal, this makes so much sense. This makes so much sense, right? Why aren't leaders inclusive? I'm going to tell you why. Here's the challenge. The reason leaders are not inclusive is because they're human beings. Uh-oh. Now, let me tell you about human beings. Human beings do not like change. Human beings work real hard to avoid change. What do we see happening in the current administration? Hey, this is a human thing. It's a human phenomenon. They're not being weird. They're being human. Here's the thing. When you understand, like, if folks like, Linal, you're not upset enough. It's like, no, I actually get it. I actually understand it. They're scared. They don't want the United States to change. They're working hard to avoid the change. That is a human behavior. That's a human behavior. That's a human behavior. You do it. I do it. My wife right now can say, I want to paint the hallway a different color. I'm going to have an instant reaction to it, even if it's going to be better. I don't know. No change. Don't change the hallway. It's going to look better. Nah, man. I'm thinking about all the work that man, I don't want no change. And the reason human beings don't like change is because we fear new because of the uncertainty it brings. There's uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty. I'm going to talk about this, I think, in the 4th part of the series, uncertainty in particular, or the 5th part of the series. But we don't like uncertainty. And then, as human beings, we're not all that great at finding similarities in other humans that appear different from us. So if you look different from me, you show up different from me, you walk different from me, you dress different from me, everything seems different, then it's kind of like, well, you stay over there, I'm stay over here. This is a human phenomenon. This is the challenge. This is why the inclusion competence gets an entire show. Because it's hard. Human beings don't like being uncomfortable. You should see the heads nod when I'm training this in corporate America. Because for the first time, leaders in the room are looking at me and they're like, you see me. You see me. This is not normal. Inclusion is not normal, folks. That is not how we were designed. In fact, if you read the Bible, we were designed to go into our own little groups ever since the Tower of Babel. These are facts. So when you tell a person to be inclusive, what you're saying is, I need for you to go against your human norms. I need for you to go against your emotional norms. I need for you to actually push against what feels inherently humanly normal for you. To begin allowing other people in. And that's scary. This is why it will be a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. And the only leaders that are inclusive are leaders who have strong leadership commitments, guiding principles, and core values. That's why part one is that's why we kicked off with it. Every time, all through the series, you're going to hear me come back to that. What's your leadership commitment? What are your core values? What are your guiding principles? Because this is not something you're going to skip yourself into as a leader. You're just not. It takes commitment and it takes hard work to be inclusive. If you're trying to figure out why you got treated the way you got treated in the workplace, it's because there was a leader who didn't have clear commitment. Inclusion absolutely is the device that unlocks diversity. That's a quote by Khalil Smith. So here's a question. Where in your personal life are you missing out on creativity or trust because you're not including all the voices around you? Inclusion beyond visibility and diversity. Inclusion doesn't equal race or gender. Even monolithic groups need inclusion. Even homogenous groups need inclusion. And when you look at a monolithic group, like let's say you have, and you're an African-American CEO, you have an all-black team. You're still going to have different personality styles. You're going to have different levels of hierarchy. You're going to have different socioeconomic backgrounds. And you will find yourself, right, leaning towards a certain group within your own organization if you're not careful. Which means that just because everybody looks alike don't mean everybody's included. Here's some examples. Introverts in meetings. Like, do you actually slow down and give them an opportunity to speak up? Hey, you know what? We've been talking a lot. Like, let's slow down. Like, or, you know what? Take the time to process it. Tomorrow, come back and share. Right? Siblings and families is another. Like a family, think about it. They all share the same last name. But if you have multiple siblings, they all show up differently. And it's easy as a parent to include some and knock out the others because they difficult. You're always like, oh my God, if I ask this child, I'm not going to even ask. Or what about the quiet friend in the group? That's the one y'all probably want to be listening to. They see it all. They thinking it all. The question is, whose voice in your circle is unheard? Not because of their identity, but maybe because of hierarchy, personality, age, all those different things. Who's unheard? All right. So there's a quote by Verna Meyer. She says, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So I'm going to invite you to the party. But then, am I even included or am I a wallflower? Now, if you're a leader and you run your own business or you lead a large division in your company, I want you to ask yourself a question. I want you to ask yourself, what is my human bias costing the business? What is my human bias costing the business? If you're an entrepreneur, what is my human bias costing my company right now? Because, when people think differently, do things, I'm just like, man, what is it costing? And what I want to do is I want to end the show with some tools that will support you as a leader with being more inclusive all the way around. Now, there are certain skills that inclusive leaders have. And inclusive leaders, they're really good at holding first themselves accountable and then others accountable, but first themselves, because you're not just going to leverage diversity. Like, you have to hold yourself accountable. Did I hear from them? Am I clear? A person who has a high inclusion competence is always practicing awareness around their bias and managing it. I told a story years ago. It was with a group of African Americans, and we were talking about why it's so difficult many times for us to do business and grow our businesses, et cetera. And I told this story. And I remember after telling the story, everybody looked horrified. And the reason they looked horrified is because I told a story about how I experienced bias against another brother that looked like me. And here's the short and long of the story. I had some boiler issues in one of the buildings that I own. The brother came, recommended to me. I asked him to come in. He, quote unquote, fixed the boiler, right? And within 24, I paid him, and within 24 hours, it shut down. And the first thing I thought is, man, this brother, man. Now, let me pause real quick. How many of us have been there? Right? Like, if you're really honest with yourself, stereotypes, the way they work, like, it's like we create our own stereotypes within our own community as well. Okay? And I'm thinking, man, this brother got over on me. So then something says, well, you ain't even call him back and tell him. Because I was ready to go in another direction. I had just met him, man, this guy. So let me call him. So I call him up. His name is Corey. Hey, Corey, man. Hey, the boiler stopped working. I said, really? He said, I'll be over there in 24 hours. Oh. Now, why did I think he wouldn't be? Right? Why did I think he wouldn't be? Okay. Now, I want you to pause right there. This brother looks like me, and I assumed the worst. What do you think happens when someone doesn't look like you? See, we get real. It's like this is a human thing, and we got to start giving each other grace and folks that don't look like us grace and saying, well, how do I work to build a bridge? What is my leadership commitment? We got to stop getting in our feelings. What is my leadership commitment? What are my guiding principles? What are my core values? Am I aligned with that? Am I anchored in that? If I'm anchored, then from that place, what decision should I make next? What action should I take next? So he came back. I think 30 minutes, man, he had everything running. It's been running since. Guess who my guy is now on all my properties? Corey. But the initial interaction, like, my bias got involved, right? For whatever reasons. And he looked like me. And he looks like me. I told this story, man, and folks like, I can't believe you, Linal. And I'm like, no, you can't believe yourself, because we all do this. like, stop it. It's a human thing. I can't believe you even thought like that about the brother. Are you kidding me? Like, we all do. If we're going to be honest, let's have an honest conversation. Let's have an honest conversation. So, how do I stay aware of my biases and manage it? Notice, like, yeah, man, I can be a particular way sometimes. How do I manage that? Stay responsible for that. How do I show genuine curiosity for people who don't look like me? Genuine curiosity. If you wonder how I've built successful organizations, it wasn't from just being curious about people who are similar to me. Most of my clients don't look like me. I can't be profitable in the businesses I run if I was just doing business in our community. So I have to have genuine curiosity about other people. How are you doing today? Like, genuine, not fake. I gotta be willing to be a little uncomfortable. What are some ways as leaders that we can practice awareness around these biases? Number one, practice awareness in your meetings. Get curious about, like, who's at the meeting, why are they, like, are the players who are supposed to be, I'm not talking about people who are supposed to be there, right, wasting money. But if somebody who's supposed to be there, not there, because you find them difficult, you're like, it'd be easier. Because remember, you're paying them 100% of their salary. Probably should just work through it, right? How do you practice awareness and how you evaluate your talent? There is a theory called the attribution theory that basically says that often in how we evaluate talent that is closer to how we look in our experience. We evaluate them higher than we evaluate others. Let me give you a perfect example. Let's say I had 2 production assistants. Okay, one is Ide. Let's say another one was of a different race. Ide could call me and say, man, I was coming from the South Side. You know how the Dan Ryan is. I'd be like, yeah, I get it, bro. I'm running a little late. No problem. I understand. I understand the Dan Ryan. I understand the South Side. You know, attribution theory. I attribute that you were doing the best that you could, right? The other one maybe is coming from up north. They're like, man, Lakeshore Drive shut down today. All right. I don't be coming north on Lakeshore Drive ever, right? So the way I see it, that doesn't happen. Yeah, whatever. You know, don't do it again. Like, completely different conversation than what I'm having with Ide. That's where it shows up. You know, am I being fair in how I evaluate my talent? How I make assumptions about my talent? And how can we practice awareness in our hiring practices? Every role in my company, I interview a diverse slate. Every role, people from all walks of life. The people that are in those roles, when y'all meet them, is because they beat everybody else out. And there was I didn't have a certain deference for black folk. It was like, you got to be the best if you're going to work for me. You must be the best. All right? Period. So, again, what is inclusion? The ability to create an environment where every person that works for me feels they can fully contribute and every customer is served optimally, regardless of differences. That's what it is. That's what it is. Now, again, this is a challenge. It's not easy. So how do you overcome the challenge? This is where we're going to close the show out. How do you overcome this challenge? Because when folks don't look like me, man, I'm like, meh. So how do I overcome that? Number one, consider that you need to become more culturally competent. What is cultural competence? To be competent about different cultures. I can promise you, and anybody that knows me well, they know I can walk into any room, any culture. And part of, thank God, I'm so well traveled, right? My cultural competence is high. I can remember, funny story. I can remember years ago, 2004, I was doing work in India. It was my first time in India. I'm on the plane. I'm getting, like we're disembarking from the plane. So I get up, got my backpack on, and I'm standing in the line there, and I'm waiting to get off the plane. And this Indian brother is leaning on my backpack. I turn around, I look at him. You know how you give him that look like, bro. And he kind of looks at me like, what? So I turn back around. He leans on my backpack again. I turn around like, bro. He looks at me like, what? I'm like, man, this dude. I'm starting to get upset. Then I look ahead of me, and the only place there's space in the line is me. Everybody is right up on everybody. It starts to hit me. Oh, wait a second. Like, personal space is different here in India. It's like, everybody did. Okay. I'm the one that's weird. So I just went and go right up to the next person. Right? Like, let's do it then. Then my man got right on me. We were all just lined up like that. But it took me a minute to be like, oh. I remember in India, the first negotiation I had with, a person in the market. And it seemed to I'm like, is this man mad? Like, we're starting, because I'm like, no. He's like, yeah. We're going back and forth. And I'm like, and I'm with someone. They like, keep going. I'm like, you sure? Because it seems emotional. And we're going back and forth. And then finally, we got to the deal. And then he started laughing. Ha, 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 my friend. He shook my hand. Very good, very. And I was like, man, that was intense. That don't seem normal. Because growing up in the States, you walk up, you pay your money, you leave, And I started realizing, okay, there's a different level of assertiveness. I saw one of my Indian brothers doing it on the plane to a stewardess where he was like, no, it's this way. She's like, sir, if you don't comply, I'm going to kick you off. And I'm like, hey, bro, in the States, you can't negotiate. Right? He looked at me and I'm like, hey, I lived in India. Like, you're going to get kicked off. And he okay, cultural competence. Right? He didn't know he was doing anything wrong. That's how they get down. It would have worked on Kingfisher Airlines. It don't work on American. Right? All right. Cultural competence. This is, not even to this day, when I move in the circle with Indians, there's a connection. Not because, and I look different, but because I understand them culturally. Right? Same thing with African brothers and sisters. They move differently. Right now I'm working a deal. I'm like, they're more relational. Do I have to show up? You all get where I'm going? Every group operates differently. Black folks operate different from white folks. It's okay. But are you culturally competent on white folks? Or are you expecting them to be, why you expect them to be culturally competent on you? Number 2, gain clarity on your personal leadership intention. You cannot do this unless you're anchored. You have to know why. One more thing about my Indian brothers and sisters. I remember, this is 2004, I'm training, and I'm in front of the room, and I stand up, and I'm like, it's the time, right? So I stand up in front of the room, and I'm waiting for them to be quiet. And I'm like, man, nothing. The presentation, I'm like, what's going on? They're so disrespectful. No. He was like, hey, man, you just got to start talking. And that's what I did. I started talking. Everybody like sat down. I was like, oh, right. Half the time it's because we just don't understand. Like, it's just different. And we'll say, these people are horrible. No. Maybe you're missing something. Okay. Number 3, create a personal plan for how you will address your implicit biases. The things that you discovered throughout your leadership journey about how you see other folks, about how you tend to have your knee-jerk reaction. Like, if you want to overcome this, those are the 3 areas that you have to practice. Cultural competence, again, is understanding and adapting to new behaviors, attitudes, and policies. So you can work cross-cultural in any situation. Being culturally competent allows you to accept the difference of people socially, within their behaviors, philosophically, and within communication. Maybe they have an accent, all those things. One of the biggest cultural competence practices is the ability to listen to understand rather than to respond. Let me say it again. Listen to understand. The people on your team, are you listening to understand rather than to respond? Are you really listening to understand rather than respond? Are you really listening? Let me put it like this. If you are not, even in your marriage, if you're not listening to understand rather than respond, there's a whole lot you don't know. If every time your spouse starts to talk, you're like, but it's a whole lot you don't know. You don't know. Like, you don't know that person the way you want to. You don't know. You keep cutting them off. They can't say nothing. Notice your preconceived notions. Increase your contact based on your lack of understanding. If there's a group you don't understand, start to work with them. Start to, find a friend. We talked about managing your intentions around your leadership intention, your leadership commitment. Again, what will your leadership legacy be? And then last, what's your plan? When you notice your bias, how will you address it? What steps will you take towards ensuring that you are leading inclusively? You are building inclusively. Thank you for watching Inspirational Perspective. If you love this show and you want to see more content like this, you can go right here. And if you like this subject and you want to see much more content that we have available for you, just click the button here. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to watch the show live, 7 a.m. every Sunday morning on WBON Radio, or you can catch it right here on YouTube or Facebook.com/Coach Linal Harris. Be sure to hit that like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so we can get more content just like this to you.